Hello, I'm Joe Ruggiero, and welcome to my podcast, Joe Ruggiero Inspired, and the people who inspire me. And I think you're in for a real treat. I just have never met this guy before, but just talked to him on the phone. He has friends that are my friends. I don't know how we've never met, but he's a great talent, wonderful architect, great vision, and it just gives me great pleasure to present Tim Barber. Welcome.
Thank you, Joe. I hope
How's
I live
life?
up to that.
How's life?
It's weird.
My producer said ask you that because he's never heard anyone come back with that retort. What makes it so weird?
Well, there are a lot of things going on. I guess we can get into those through this interview, but right now I'm making some serious moves in my firm to include senior people as owners in the firm, and we are seeking a different kind of work than we have done for the last 30 years. And I've got, I'm doing exceptionally vigorous landlord duties on a property that I own, so I'm learning to be a handyman after
Wow.
a long time. So lots going on.
Is that something new that you've become a landlord, or?
No, but I don't have the kind of help that I had in the last years because my partner and I are living in separate cities right now because of a career move he's made. So I'm not sure all that needs to be on tape.
No, but whatever. I mean, it's all part of the process. Let's talk about your childhood. You had a very interesting childhood. Now, seeing you across the table from me, I would never imagine that you were the black sheep of the family. Why?
Well, it's probably just because all my siblings are saints. I was born in a trailer park in Appalachia, about 5 minutes from Knockemstiff and 20 minutes from Middletown, which is the home base for the book Hillbilly Elegy.
Right.
And my parents had no college degrees, and we had very little money. But those appearances are pretty deceiving. Chillicothe, Ohio, where I was born, was the first capital of Ohio and a very wealthy trading city in the 1700s before Ohio became a state. So it was packed with Greek Revival and federal architecture, beautiful buildings. There's even a Benjamin Latrobe, the governor's mansion, is in Chillicothe. So these amazing buildings that fascinated me all my life. I think also my parents were both valedictorians of their high school classes and very motivated. They were very involved in making the Ohio school system the best in the nation at that time. They were actively involved in the hospital board. We had race relations meetings in our home in the 60s with the black parents of my friends and schoolmates to try to work through community issues. And so even though, I have that poor boy beginning, if you will, I think that I was raised in such a way that it's formed the way I look at the world now, my worldview.
But you told me something very interesting. You had a vision of what you wanted to do, and your dad supported that. And he was a good father to you. I mean, he really sort of helped you.
I was a difficult child, hyperactive, easily distracted, and my dad would take me to the woods, and we would study tree bark or bird calls or insects, or we'd go mushroom hunting because he was really good at finding mushrooms in May, usually. When shortly after we built our first house, there was a climbing rose on the porch, and he would cut a rose from that plant, sometimes several times a day, and put it in a glass of water and have me draw it. And so I drew hundreds of roses before I was 6. It was just his way of getting me to focus on something. And I look back on that now, I don't think I would be here if he hadn't done that. My mom was equally involved in getting us focused and doing things like, we'd have dramatic plays that she would direct on our back porch for our neighbors, just to get us as children to be, and there were 5 of us, get us to see the world outside that little community where we lived.
My father was a horticulturist, not by trade or anything, but he appreciated gardens, flowers, whatever. He was an immigrant from Calabria, Italy. And he really sort of instilled in me the opportunity of looking at a flower or observing a garden. And he also was the first person to have arugula in his vegetable garden. And we thought he was crazy. Now it's very au courant. But he would pick this arugula and we would say, oh, it's so tart and, what have you. And now it's the mainstay of gourmet cooking,
I grow it.
It's very interesting. But what was your vision? Why did you break away? Or what did you want as a kid?
Well, when I went to school in Cincinnati, I had already fallen in love with history and craft-forward, proven ways of thinking about structure. And in Cincinnati, which was a modernist school, my last three years were an off-the-grid sustainable collective in a canyon in Kentucky, an urban infill complex in downtown Cincinnati, and the conversion of a 1930s leukemia hospital to an art colony and display space. Wow. None of those were what my professors wanted for me. I didn't want to do Disney Hall or the Transamerica Tower. I wanted to make something using pieces of the past.
Well, that's what's interesting about some of the photos that I've seen of your projects, is that I can't say it's actually classical Spanish or California architecture, but you do incorporate little details that do speak of the past, which I think is wonderful.
In my firm, we have a question we always ask: what's the problem? We see ourselves as problem solvers. So what's the assignment? What's the goal? What's the problem to be solved? And in architecture, Mark Appleton uses this expression, if you were asked to design a fork, would you look at the history of forks? Or would you try to figure out how to get food from a plate to your mouth? And I think in my world, learning from the past doesn't mean being slavish to the past. In fact, it usually means improving on the past and doing something differently, maybe turning it on its head. But the vernacular architecture that we have spent the last 30 years doing is in many ways seeing how the problem was solved earlier.
I think that that's interesting because I was just telling my last guest, or the guest before, that the Italians have an expression, no problems, only solutions. And I love that because the French are very different. And, it's not possible.
I've heard that.
Which I love because my son-in-law is French, and they're living in France now. So it's a very, very different mindset. But I've always sort of embraced that Italian culture because I think it's the way. Anxiety, no. There's no anxiety in Italy. Only great food and good times. But tell me a little bit about your business now and how that came to be and how you developed it.
Well, I came to California shortly after college, and I worked for 3 years in a development company doing multifamily restorations or conversions. And then I had a life-changing event where I went on a game show with Betty White, and I won buckets of money. And so I left that job, and I bought property of my own, and I started developing that. And shortly after that, I hung my shingle out, and I started practicing for other people, and that was 30 years ago. But the question has always been the same. What's the problem? With my firm, sometimes the problem is, how do I raise smart or athletic children? How do I come up with a place where I can have safe, serene, and invigorating years in my golden years? How can I raise money for an institution I belong to? How can I bring my community together for real conversations in a place where real problems get tackled? Those are the problems that we hear from our clients. And so that's what we're working on. They're not necessarily architectural problems in how to build a hillside house on stilts, but that's, I think, been the driving force. And as a result, we don't have a style. We don't have even a stylistic process. We rely on images, and we really love detail and color and light. And for me, having a sustainable, water-conserving house is on par with having a house that lets dappled morning light bounce off the floor. The beauty of the house, in many ways, is as necessary to make strong children, for example,
Right.
as water conservation. They're both the same.
Well, certainly your environment is very, very important to me and always has been. And I asked my son, who's not with us anymore, the other day, how would you describe your childhood? And he immediately said, magical. And I thought, as a father, that's a great thing, because that's what you want. You want to create the environment that is healthy, that encourages growth, and so important. And in my older years now, because we love Calabasas, I've been trying to find one-floor dwellings. There are very few one-floor dwellings. And as we get older, we don't need stairs, and we don't need tubs that you can get in and out of with showers and whatever. And what you're about to do is exceptional, I think. Now, you had a life-changing experience when you went to London.
I did.
If you could tell us about that and why you pursued that.
I've spent 30 years doing fantastic single-family residences. I have had the most engaged and smart and kind clients with budgets enough to do the kind of work that you'll see on the website. And that's really rewarding. And we've solved problems in unique ways for people I still am close to and who appreciate it. But that wasn't exactly what I was going for back in school. I think that especially now with climate change and even other threats, I'm going to call them, like the internet, which keep us from being face-to-face in some of our more confrontational discussions we must have, that it's important to get my hands back into the work I meant to do in college originally. So finding ways to use our resources in a way that's not just net zero, but actually increases our capacity is within reach. I think finding ways where communities are not just conserved, but they're actually improved, and people want to live there because they've got something going on, which might be safety, or it might be greenery, or it might be the way children and elders interact in some safe way. And that's within reach, but we don't really focus on that. There are funny expressions in our culture right now: throw it away. Where's away? Running water. Running from where? How? Like, it's not a natural thing. Natural gas. There's nothing natural about the way we get gas into our cars and drive here, as I just did. So seeing the world differently without the kind of phrasing we've used means opening up the box and looking at everything you can find about a building or the community that it's in, or the reason it was, or the reason people are attached to it. Knowing everything you can about the carbon science of what it would cost to throw it away versus what it would cost to restore it or convert it to some other use. That's what I wanted to learn in London, and that's what I got. I was taught by really boots-on-the-ground professionals who've been doing this for their whole careers in landscape design and development, in building science, in conservation. In every regard, I was taught by people who've been doing this, not just teaching it, but doing it for a long, long time.
Didn't Disney try that
I
with
don't know.
his communities? I'm not exactly familiar with.
No, but you've intrigued me. Now I have to find out.
Oh, yeah. Well, please do, because I don't think it was very successful. But I think what you have to do is get and find those people who want to be in part of that congregation. Because I think that we live in such a divergent society that, and I've always been one that has to know my neighbors. And my wife says, I don't know what you do that, mind your own business. And, but I said, I want to know who I'm living with. And I've met some great friends by doing that. And what amazed me coming to California is that everybody is, very close, but they keep very much to themselves. There's very little, mixing and matching, which surprised me. And I was very, very intrigued by Japan because of their small gardens and their love of bonsai and their homes that are easily assembled and the way in which they live. That inspired me a great deal.
I think it's possible to have both. You can have privacy and you can have connection. But like you just did, you are obligated to reach out. You can't just expect it to happen to you. So if you want to know your neighbors, you go knock on their door or drop a postcard or initiate an email thread where everybody's on it. So if
I'm not that organized. I'm just like,
Okay,
when I take
I
the
went too
garbage
far.
out, I say hello and introduce myself.
But that's, I think, the right intention. That's how we get from isolation to connection.
And I also believe that gardens are very therapeutic. And I know for a fact, because I had a conversation with her, Audrey Hepburn, the reason she did Gardens of the World is she felt that in the garden, she finds the most peace and tranquility. And I think my father taught me that, and I think yours did as well.
He did, and I do every morning before I go to work. I'm in my garden. Every evening when I come home, I'm watering or weeding. I have a wild, my entire yard is edible. Everything is grapes or olives or apricots or figs or lots of citrus and rosemary and tomatoes. And maybe that's in homage to my dad because he was a big gardener, but I think for me it's not so much about the produce, it's about the peace. I calm down. I come from work, I'm all excited. I've been dealing with things all day long, and usually I'm in a happy place, not always, but it's a great way to just let it go.
Absolutely. Now, the thing that I am involved with is more decorative items in the garden. Love flowers, love plants, love succulents, that kind of thing. But my daughter, who's married to the Frenchman, she wanted to be able to cook from her garden, the old Victory Garden. And she and he built this potager, which I guess is the French term for a vegetable garden. They ripped up the entire front yard of this piece of property that was a foreclosure that they bought and created this edible garden.
That's awesome.
And it's so wonderful to go there because she's a great cook. She has her own channel, Entertaining with Beth, if I can put a plug in. But she does a great job using the herbs and vegetables and espaliered fruit trees that she has in her garden to cook with. I
Entertaining
love
with
that.
Beth. I'll look that up.
Yeah. Now, what else are we to look for with these communities that you are going to be designing?
Well, now that I'm out of school again, I am working with my team to steer the ship a little differently. And it's worth mentioning, I don't have kids, but I have young teammates that I actively mentor. So for me, that's, I think, as close as I will get. The upshot of that is that I have the most amazing team. I have 25 youngish people, mostly young, that show up early and leave late, who are constantly bringing some new idea, new visual, some different way to look at the problem to the table. It was what gave me the privilege of taking a year off with almost no contact while I was in London. And now that I'm back, I have these people who not only are curious and competent, but they have enough confidence to know that if we make a new direction, they can probably go with it. So we're having some of it's open conversation, sort of vision sessions where we talk about what they would like the next 5 years to be. And of course, I've got my own point of view. I'm really interested in doing adaptive reuse, where you convert empty or nearly empty or abandoned or underused buildings to something really purposeful. Usually, in my world, it would be involving residential component. maybe mixed use with housing on the top floors, or some way to subdivide it so you put people and activity in close proximity. And so we've pitched some projects like that. We might be doing one, well, knock wood, in the very near future, and then more. But I think the point of taking everything we've ever learned about residential architecture in the highest of its art form and applying that to solving the problem of abandoned buildings in what might have been a great community and now is kind of sad, or someplace that really could be and never was, might have been almost an industrial park, or a really commercial strip that closed up at 5 o'clock and everyone went home and it was sterile and cold. I think those are places that really need a second look, and that's our goal, to try to take everything we've learned from doing housing and apply it to buildings that need housing and other things too.
Well, it's very interesting to me because I think that the complexity of the geography is changing, and there are a lot of landlords that are greedy, and they'll just sit on empty spaces until they get the right price, which I think is so wrong. That's my personal feeling. And to have someone come in and rescue these properties and think, what is the problem here? What do we need to do to make this viable and inspirational, to want people to rent or own,
desirable,
or whatever? Yes,
a real magnet, as opposed to that's sketchy kind of opinion you might have about a building that was in need.
Exactly.
But when you figure it out and you make it appealing, and there are other components that aren't architecture, I call it programming. How do you have events or music festivals or community chats or something in a space which then gives it a draw that lets people discover how nice it is? So it's not just building, but that's the biggest component of it.
There's a lot of psychology going into this project.
A bit. And one thing we miss in all of that, I serve often on these urban panels where we're supposed to be either presenting or commenting on a brand new plan for community feedback. But the problem with most of those is that the plan's already done. So the community feedback is comment on what you've done. But the real psychology of that is to bring them in before you design it. And you have these feedback sessions about what the community would think would be safer or more exciting or more would escalate their property values. There are all sorts of reasons. But if you ask those questions first and then you design something, your community feedback is way more valuable than the way we've been doing it, especially in the States.
Now, will these be gated communities?
Oh, gosh, no. Well, no. I wouldn't rule that out, but no, that's usually these buildings are either on the street or they're in places where they're accessible. So I think the goal would be, by community, I just mean it's almost like filling a gap tooth in a beautiful smile. If you've got this community that's kind of working, there might be a little park down the street, maybe you make a better park or a second park in your complex, or maybe you bring in a couple necessary retail, maybe it's food, or maybe it's a restaurant or a coffee shop. So you start to bring in the things that the people who will live there also want. And so it's almost the opposite of a gated community in that it's so integrated,
right,
so knit together with the other things we do, which then maybe might have the side appeal of using our cars less because we don't have to drive to the market.
Exactly. I once again learned this from my father because, as I say, he was an immigrant. He loved going to historic living museums. And one of his favorites was Williamsburg, Virginia. And we used to stay in one of the restored houses. I just found that feeling of community. And I just loved as a kid going to the blacksmith and going to the pharmacy and going to whatever. And I found it very, very inspirational and also comforting. Why is that?
I think you're able to imagine a different way people lived because they didn't decide to put the blacksmith place there. It had been there, and they just maybe recreated it out of whole cloth, but that's where it had been. So they've, I think, tried to illustrate in a pretty accurate way what life might have been like when you walk down those streets and sidewalks and in and out of those buildings, you're having a similar experience to what the people who built that community from whole cloth wanted at the time. That's the way we lived. And we don't live that way any longer, but we could.
And I think, too, the architecture, important. I can remember our first dwelling when we were first married back in 1968. We lived in New Jersey, and it was a 200-year-old home that the original structure, they added on from there, and they wanted income property. So they gave us, we had to pay for it, but it was our first home. It was not in a really good area, but we just loved that house so much because the kitchen had a walk-in fireplace.
Oh, wow.
We did the history because they kept all the books, the family that owned the piece of property. And it gave us such a great launch. It was tiny. And, when we had our second child, I used to laugh and think, are we going to have to put this girl in the top drawer of our dresser to sleep? But we finally moved out of there because we just didn't want to, because it was so special and so charming.
You bring up something that's important to me. Old buildings need maintenance. And I've been in contact with a few universities looking at ways I might be useful on campus with abandoned old buildings, but no one sees maintenance or even restoration as a naming opportunity, for example. And funding maintenance on any sort of building requires advanced thinking. But everything on the planet needs maintenance. My garden needs maintenance. I can't work out on Monday and not keep working out the rest of the week and expect not to fall over. I think there's an attitude towards maintenance that we don't acknowledge. Everything
Sure.
we have and treasure needs a little love.
And that includes medical help.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. Most
Yeah.
people, I can remember a sister, unfortunately she's not with us, did not want to go to the doctor because he was just going to give her bad news. I said, that bad news is helpful because you can correct it right then and there. And most people don't want to do that.
Yeah, like refusing to brush your teeth because something might be in there.
Or it might hurt. Isn't that true? So I think that your goal is terrific. You have already started the plans. Is it going to be launched soon?
When we have our first commission, which I hope is very soon, we'll be talking about it. We'll be putting on Instagram or wherever we can. We've got several opportunities right now that I wish were done because I've been home now a year from my schooling in London. So I'm ready, and my team is ready. So we'll keep you posted on that.
Now you will have a marketing plan as well.
Yes, I think
And do you have that in-house, or
we
will
do.
that be?
I have a communications director in my firm, and so like you might think that everything we put on Instagram or the blog post is something I do in my spare time. I don't.
Well, Oprah told me once she did it all herself.
Really?
And I was so amazed. I have history with Oprah, and I can remember her saying, I write all the checks, I look at all the books, I run my own business, and I really admired her for that because it takes a lot of skill and it takes some time, but she didn't have much.
I do most of that. I write my own checks and I check my own books, even though I have a controller in the office. I think agency, ownership, you can't just ignore that. Mm-hmm. You have to pay attention.
Absolutely.
And I'm very involved in the things we write. In fact, I often write things myself, but I think that my firm and my attitude is that it's better when you're not doing it alone. And so whether it's communications or accounting or business operations, teaching, I have one amazing teacher, David Stone, in my office. He's our director of operations. He taught something today, taught AI to the entire group, but he's always teaching Revit or some drafting protocol, or I teach construction terms once a month. Everyone in the office teaches something, especially the senior people will teach something that they know.
That's wonderful.
So we're way better together.
Well, I must attest that I've been married for 56 years.
Wow, congratulations.
And in the first part of that marriage, she was not involved in my business at all. In the last 20 years, she runs the business. And I'm happy to say we've finally been making a profit.
It reminds me of a conversation I saw with my parents when I was quite young, where my mother turned to my dad and said, "Ray, give me the checkbook." After that, we had vacations.
Isn't that so true? I mean, that's what a real partnership is. And I think it's so important, whether it be in business or whether, of course, you have to trust a family member. I mean, my daughter worked for me for 8 years. We traveled all over the world for HGTV doing video and production, and she ran the production. She would put a book together, she would make the negotiations for the locations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was probably one of the most incredible experiences of my lifetime, and I cherish that.
Yeah,
It's so important.
that's what we're going for.
No man's an island.
No man or woman.
Right. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to meet you, Tim.
Joe, it's
Gotta
been
have
fun.
you back. Gotta have you back.
Thank you.
Thank you.